Under the bright night lights in searing temperatures, the Formula One calendar lands in Doha for the Qatar Grand Prix. And this is a weekend in which we are likely to crown Max Verstappen a three-time world champion. Plus, it's our fourth sprint race of the year on a track F1 has only been to once. Here is your weekend warm-up. Hello and welcome to a pretty muggy, pretty hot paddock, and what a weekend we have in store. Our fourth sprint weekend of the year, a weekend in which we're likely to see a world champion crowned for the third time, and Lawrence Barretto and Will Buxton alongside me. How about that, boys? We're set for one, aren't we?
We are. It's wonderful to be here. I just want to say the job that they've done with this paddock is astonishing. The only thing that remains from the last time Formula One raced here is the track. And even that's been resurfaced. But all of this was demolished 7 months ago, rebuilt within that time. And it's a bit like a massive shopping mall, but it's honestly, it's so impressive. It's just raised the bar again of what's achievable for an F1 paddock.
And the teams love it, don't they? Because they've got such massive spaces to host guests. They just can put their elbows out a little bit. And most tracks we go to, there's such a squeeze here. So there's a really nice vibe out here. You've seen loads of drivers sitting outside on the terraces, having a great time.
It's stunning, isn't it, actually, to look down? I know what you mean about the shopping mall vibe, though.
Yes.
But the LED displays with each of the team names, Pirelli, F1 and FIA as well. Yeah, not quite like the paddocks that we've seen so far this year. They're truly taking it up another notch, as if F1 could continue going up notches. But Will, this is our first time here at the Qatar Grand Prix.
For
Lawrence,
you and me, yes.
Yeah, Lawrence, you were here last time out in 2021, but as Will alluded to there, all changed, certainly out on track, isn't it, in terms of resurfacing curbs, perhaps?
Yeah, it does. The layout obviously is exactly the same. So all of the corners, they all go left like they did in 2021. They all go right like they did in 2021. But like Will said, the resurfacing is going to be interesting. How the heat really affects things, because it's very, very hot, much hotter than when we were here last time. And there's going to be a lot of track evolution, because Formula One's the only series that's running this weekend. So every session they're out there, the rubber's going down, and things are going to keep improving. Are you desperate to say so?
And just to pick up on your point, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. The curbs that you talked about, last time we were here, they were a major talking point. They created some damage to the cars. So they've taken away those double curbs, but they've replaced them with curbs that have huge drops on the far side of them. So you have the white line at the edge of the track, then you have the curb, then you have a drop. Some of them are about a 3 centimetre drop, some of them are a 5 centimetre drop. So if you go over that curb and get your right wheels or left wheels over the curb, the car is going to pitch down and you're going to scrape the bottom of the car along those curbs. So we could still see damage to the cars created by these curbs. Plus, it's a sprint weekend. And that one practice session will be in the sunlight, in 40-plus degree heat. It will be scalding out there. And every single competitive session after that will be at night. So you've got a dusty, resurfaced track, one session in the boiling heat, and then everything that follows has nothing in common with that session. It's going to be, who knows?
Red hot, literally.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be an intriguing weekend. As I mentioned, we are set for a big one here. And in talking about tyres as well, Pirelli bringing the 3 hardest compounds here, it is going to be very, very high in terms of tyre stress. Tyre deg, that's something teams are going to have to get on top of, as Will mentions, of course, with just 1 hour of practice to come. Now, before we get into all of the news building up to the Qatar Grand Prix, we're going to take a look back now at the Japanese Grand Prix. I wasn't there. I had the race off. Lawrence, you weren't there either. That means it comes down to one man.
We had promised that I would never be asked to do these again because I'm so bad at them.
I don't remember that promise, but Lawrence is there to help you if you need it.
I reckon I got it.
I know you're nervous.
I was there.
You were there.
I'm quite nervous.
You should really do it. Okay,
right.
Will, go on then.
Oscar Piastri on the front row of the grid alongside Max Verstappen. And as the lights went out, Piastri actually got a really good start and admitted after the race he was thinking about Senna prosting it down into turn 1. There's Albon. He got a bit of a knock, big schmozzle at the back, and then loads of contact. That was Sergeant biffing out Bottas. Checo biffed out Magnussen. And then there was a safety car. The Mercedes drivers were pushing each other around the place, having tons of fun. Most people decided to go for 2 stops. George Russell stayed out and decided to go for the 1 stop. Ultimately, that wasn't the right strategy. He ended up falling back down through the field. Perez retired from the race, got out of the car, went to the loo, I don't know, and then about 40 minutes later, got back in the car to pick up the penalty so that he doesn't get a grid drop for this weekend. Then everybody fires through. Verstappen won the race from Lando Norris, brilliant. Piastri P3. Who then? Leclerc was P4, and then it was Lewis. Fernando was in there. George was back in there as well. Carlos was in the points. Oh, and the two Alpine drivers really weren't happy with each other at the end of the race after the team told Gasly to let Ocon through for P9.
I know you were nervous.
This is
I'm
why
really
I don't
impressed.
do these.
No, I'm impressed. You did miss the fact though that Red Bull were crowned constructors.
Oh, they were.
champions
Yes, Red Bull were
in
crowned
Japan.
constructors champions.
Did you say the word schmozzle as well?
Yes, schmozzle.
I've never heard that, but I quite like it. Should we make it a technical term?
Carambolage, schmozzle.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Nevertheless, Red Bull picked up the constructors' standings, picked up that title. Max Verstappen with another win. He is now on 400 points. He's 177 clear of teammate Sergio Perez. Lawrence Barretto, what do the permutations look like in terms of him clinching his third world title this weekend?
I mean, it's more than likely going to be done in the sprint on a Saturday. Essentially, Max needs to not finish and Checo needs to finish third or higher to keep it alive. But even then, it's only going to keep it alive a little longer into the Grand Prix. So it's almost certainly going to happen this weekend. It's just a case of when.
A case of
He
when?
needs 3 points.
3 points
That's
is all
it.
it is. I know. And it's an extraordinary feat, isn't it, that Red Bull and Max Verstappen have achieved. Fernando Alonso said it earlier, huge congratulations to them, that they have won not just races in mass, but tricky races as well, races in which they've won in the rain. We had so many rain-affected races through June and July where conditions were changing all over the place. And it's, I think, the consistency that certainly has impressed Fernando Alonso and has impressed us as well, hasn't it, Will?
Yeah, talk to any of the drivers, and we were talking to them all today and asking them, what they made of Max's season, and a couple of words kept cropping up. One was relentless, one was consistent, and that is the story of Max Verstappen's season, as you say, in all conditions, on all tracks. Maybe not as happy on street tracks as on some of the other tracks, but everywhere he's gone, he has been relentless, he has been consistent, he's been pretty much perfect everywhere. And with that car at his disposal, there's just been no stopping him. Even Lewis Hamilton today, took his hat off and said, look, Red Bull and Max, what they have achieved this year, what they've done with that car, what Max has done this year it's been brilliant, and you can't take anything away from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Max Verstappen, he's already made history. He's broken records this season. He is now poised on the brink of becoming a 3-time world champion, and we spoke to him a little bit earlier on.
You can be champion on Saturday. You probably answered this question 100 times today already. You can be champion on Saturday. You should make you only the second driver in history to win 3 championships, your first 3 championships in a row. First of all, do records like that mean anything to you? And second, what does it actually take, mentally, physically, out of your life, to win 3 consecutive world championships?
It's hard to fully, I guess, explain. I mean, it will be, of course, amazing to win it here. For me, if it's Saturday or Sunday, I don't think it matters a lot. But I think it's always nice at the first possible opportunity to win it. And yeah, to win 3 championships in a row, I think it's never easy. Of course, you need a very good car for that. But for me, I think what I always try to achieve is just being consistent and try not to have too many mistakes as a driver. And that's something that you constantly are working on, to try and be as consistent as possible, reliable, which, of course, we're having a great season, and the car's in a really great window, except Singapore, but all the other races, of course, it was really nice to drive. But yeah, it's still easy when you're driving on the limit to make mistakes, and that's what I try to eliminate. And 3 championships, many races a year, of course, but I love racing. I love racing F1 cars, so this is, for me, of course, the best thing out there, and that's why, I also really enjoy it. And of course, when you're winning, you enjoy it even more.
Tricky weekend for everybody ahead. New surface on the track out there. Sprint weekend, lots to learn in a very short space of time.
Yeah, a lot of question marks, I think, as well. We prepared in the best way possible on the simulator, but again, the tarmac, we don't know. It's going to be very windy, I think, tomorrow as well, which will make it quite difficult, I think, for the cars, because these new generation of cars being so big, so wide, they're quite sensitive to wind. So yeah, a lot of unknowns, but I like to come here. It's a really beautiful track to drive, a lot of fun. So hopefully it will be like that when we drive it tomorrow.
Finally, one curveball, I guess. Aston Martin announced this week that they are entering Le Mans with the Valkyrie, which Adrian Newey obviously designed. Would you one day in the future like to do Le Mans in a car that Adrian had designed? Maybe not the Valkyrie itself, but given the relationship that you and Adrian have, how much you're clearly loving driving his cars, would you like to do Le Mans in an Adrian Newey car?
I definitely will do Le Mans, but it needs to also, come together. Like, I don't want to rock up there and just be filling up the field. Like, if I enter, I want to, of course, have a good preparation. I want to be able to win. Of course, there's BOP. I mean, that's always a bit tough, but at least I want to be competitive, so it needs to be a proper preparation. And for sure, I mean, if it's possible, maybe with the RB17, who knows, what is possible to go to Le Mans. But it's great. I think it's great for the sport that they're going there with the Valkyrie. I mean, it's an amazing car, and the V12 engine is going to sound incredible. So I'm very happy that they do it. I will definitely be watching, and maybe Fernando will be driving the car anyway, so it's going to be great.
Amazing.
Great line there from Max Verstappen. He's definitely going to drive Le Mans. I love it. On a weekend in which he is about to win, or is likely to win, his third world title, he's already lining up more motorsport feats that he can achieve, Will.
Yeah, I love that. But it shows there's a bigger picture for Max now that exists, even outside of Formula One. He's got the contract through to 26.
28.
28. Of course, it is 28. So he's going to be around for a while, but if he can jump in a Le Mans entry within that time, he'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sergio Perez, on the other side of the garage, has had two pretty difficult weekends. Japan, the more difficult, as you mentioned, Will, with the penalty that he served out on track,
yes,
un-DNFing himself, unretiring himself. You spoke to the FIA about this, didn't you? Because watching from home, I was obviously watching on the sofa, like many of you at home now. I was perturbed by the fact that that was allowed. I hadn't seen that rule before, and I think many people were asking, how on earth is this allowed?
It doesn't often happen. It has happened in the past, but it doesn't often happen, and the FIA have basically said, look, it's a rarity. For the most part, people either serve the penalties in the race or their car is damaged to the extent that they can't serve the penalty in the race, and it's then carried over to the next Grand Prix as a grid penalty, which Checo would have had here this weekend had he not served it in Japan. They will obviously look at the wording, and they've said just as part of their regular sort of reviews of rules and with races, and they'll look at that and see if there's anything that does need tweaking, but they're not giving it any real special consideration after that because it's such a rarity. But yeah, they've said they'll give it a look and see if it needs tweaking and just tightening up a little bit, tighten the bolts a little bit.
Okay, well, Red Bull, of course, constructor champions, and Christian Horner will be a very happy man. He's already looking, though, towards Toto Wolff, and the comments that he's plotting sort of Mercedes comeback. And, of course, Lewis Hamilton equally saying that they're going to need the best 6 months of development they have ever had to try and get back on terms through 2024. At the moment, though, Lawrence, their fight is very much in P2 with Ferrari, isn't it? Just 20 points between those two teams.
Yeah, there's nothing in it, and unfortunately for Mercedes, it's Ferrari who have got the momentum, and Mercedes are really just trying to hold on, and it's kind of the story of their season. You've had Lewis and George pretty disappointed with how the cars felt at most Grand Prix circuits that we visited this year, and when they've brought updates or they've brought new packages, they just haven't delivered the kinds of steps in performance that they thought they would do, and it's just all kind of just fallen away a little bit too quickly. Obviously, Lewis has said that 6 months of development is what they need to catch up. But they need to make sure that development is the right development, and that what the concept that they're working on for next year, which is where all of their resource obviously is going now, has to be the right one. They can't afford another year like this.
No, absolutely not. Well, he won here in 2021. Let's hear now from Lewis Hamilton.
You can finish this season second in the Drivers' Championship. I know it's not the title that you would have wanted to gun for at the start of the season, but would that mean something to you to be able to finish in that position against someone like Checo in the car that he's had this year?
It's difficult to say what it's going to mean or what it can mean. I think for us, I'm definitely proud of the job I think we've done. We started off really on the back foot. We've had so many challenges this year. For us to be second in constructors, I think it's huge, and it's not spoken about a lot, but given the package that we've had, I think it's been really great. And from a driver's perspective, I mean, it's really dependent on what Checo does in his next races. But I'm proud of how I have driven, particularly in the races this year, and I'll be chasing as hard as I can to see if I can close that down. I think it would be a really great accomplishment if we did get second, but it's not gonna really bother me either way. I'm also really focused on next year. So.
You said the team needs 6 months like it's never had before for the start of next season. From what you're seeing at the factory, from the meetings you're involved with, how confident are you with the direction the team is taking in the car they're going to deliver you for next year?
I think it's really difficult It's really difficult when you go into the winter. I mean, I've been going in for a long, long time over the years, and it's too early to say. But when I look at the aero department, and I walked in the other day and just saw everyone with their heads down, I was like, yes, these guys are on it. I'm 100% faith in them that they're going to figure it out and get us to where we need to be. There's not a single one of them that's happy with where we are. But you still can't take away from they have worked incredibly hard the past 2 years. It's just they're not really. It's just been unfortunate not been necessarily paddling as hard as every year in the right direction. But I have every faith that they can, with some alterations in terms of course, we will get there.
Finally, Max is going to wrap up a third title this weekend. You know what it takes to win a world championship. You know what it takes to win 2 in a row, 3 in a row.
Yep.
What does it take? The relentless drive, the push to defend a title, and then to defend a double title, to win 3 in a row.
Yeah, I mean, he's not defending really this title, but definitely not had to do any defending this one. But he's done an exceptional job. He's been faultless, and no one can take that away from him. And the team have done an incredible job for the past couple of years. They have been the best team by far for at least these past 2 years. And fully deserving. And I only hope that we can one day get back to giving them the run for their money, like we did back in the day. But I hope they enjoy it. They should do, because they've done an exceptional job.
We want to see that too.
Well, good to hear there from Lewis Hamilton and indeed Max Verstappen as well. Big chats from the two of them on the eve of the Qatar Grand Prix. Mercedes clearly working very hard to close out not just P2 in the constructor standings for the team, but also, of course, P2 in the driver standings for Lewis Hamilton as well. Lawrence, coming to you. Can Mercedes hold on, do you think, to that P2? And does this track suit them more than Ferrari this weekend, knowing Ferrari's recent form?
I actually think probably Ferrari are going to have the edge here again. I say that based on the fact they seem to understand their car a lot more, and they understand the direction that they're going with the developments. And you just see when you talk to Carlos and you talk to Charles how confident they are. And it's the polar opposite really when you talk to George and Lewis. I think they're hopeful, and they're encouraged by the efforts that the team are putting in. But in terms of what is coming out on the racetrack, they kind of ultimately know where they are. So it's going to be fun to watch those guys battle it out for the next few races, because it is tight and it can be swinging on big results. And Lewis had a great race out in Japan, didn't he? And kind of gave them a bit of some momentum there. And things flipped over for Charles and Carlos in terms of performance.
And for Lewis as well, just briefly, we're talking about him coming P2, and as you mentioned to him, Will, obviously it's not what he'd have wanted coming into any Formula One season. But actually, consistently, he has just been there, hasn't he? He's shown his true class this season.
It's really interesting because you look at him and George, and they're tied in qualifying. There's nothing to pick between the two of them. And Lewis has kind of almost got into a negative spiral after FP1 pretty much every weekend, and has been out of sorts with the car going into quali. It's in the races where he's really pulled it out, has almost double the points that George has amassed so far this year. I think Lewis has had a really, really good year when you look at his Grand Prix results. I don't think the biggest problem for them right now, though, is going to be Ferrari. And I think, sprint weekends seem to suit Ferrari. I worry for them here in the heat, because traditionally that's a little bit of an issue for them with tyre deg. And, okay, they had the luxury of 2 stops in Japan, which they won't have here. Well, unless tyre deg really is massive. The issue they've got is McLaren. And McLaren are so strong right now. That second upgrade package that they've got has put them very much into second place in terms of overall speed for teams in the sport. Mercedes have had a really steady year, kind of being third across all races. And that team that's been second has been, one race it was McLaren, and one race it was Aston Martin, one race it was Ferrari. And Mercedes just kind of stayed there in third. Now they've been pushed back because McLaren have jumped up. That could be the difference for Mercedes or for Lewis in taking that second place in the drivers or constructors, I think, is how far McLaren have come on.
Well, before we come on to McLaren, we'll talk about the team who are just ahead of them and indeed behind the battle for second place, and that is Aston Martin.
Yeah.
And for a team that started so well, the stats have truly swung the way of McLaren in this fight at the moment for P4. They've scored just 67 points in the last 8 races compared to 155 for McLaren. Lawrence, where do you see this sort of nosedive in performance coming from? Do you see an upturn here? Is it in terms of that development of the car?
I think we've just got to put it into context that this is a team that finished 7th last year, and then they were suddenly the second best team at the start of this year. And now where they're punching in and around that 4th, 5th, 6th in terms of the fastest team over a race weekend is probably just a natural conclusion. It's also a team that's growing, and it's growing very, very quickly. And you can't just go from an operation that's used to be fighting for P4 and the constructors generally when you're punching above your weight to a team that operates on the level of Mercedes, of Red Bull, of Ferrari. So I think what they did is just made life much harder for themselves because they had such a great winter and they had such a strong start to the year, and Fernando obviously made the best of that and got all of those podiums. But all it's just showing is that actually they probably just overperformed over the winter, and it's just going to take a little bit of time. It's going to be hard for them, I think, just based on talking to other teams and people within Aston Martin for them to hold on. McLaren are coming, and I just can't see how they're going to hold them off in the constructors for P4.
I think Aston Martin should be really disappointed, actually, with what's happened to them this season, because they did such a great job over the winter. And their strength when they were Force India or Racing Point or whatever you want to call them was using limited budget and limited time to huge benefit and to tremendous effect to make the right decisions, to put the right developments on the car, and to outperform the big spending rivals. So in this new budget cap era, that team, that hub of individuals should have been primed to make the most of it. And you look at the big signings they've made, great, but how much has that shifted a culture within that team away from what they were already brilliant at? It should have been the perfect storm for them. So I think there's probably a small element within that team that's not quite gelling of new processes and new ideas coming in, butting up against their traditional ways of doing things, because the winter was perfect. This season, because they still had that additional wind tunnel time, it should have been the perfect opportunity for them. With everything they knew, everything they'd learned, as the big teams had to get used to doing what Racing Point always used to do in the old days. They should have been absolutely there. They've got no one really to blame but themselves through all of this. They should have absolutely locked that thing in, and they'll be kicking themselves. They'll be really disappointed.
We'll see what they can do in the last few races of the season, indeed, in which we may see. Obviously, Lance Stroll has had a really torrid time of it for the last 2 weekends as well. So hopefully we'll see him back in the car and fighting fit for this weekend. McLaren was certainly fighting fit last weekend, many predicting they'll be right up there again. It was a double podium for them last time out in Japan. We spoke to Lando Norris a bit earlier.
The fight in both the Constructors and Drivers' World Championships is on for you guys right now.
Is it?
Well,
I've not seen the drivers. I've not looked since round 1.
So you're level with George.
I'm level with George?
Level with George on points, and you're 20 points behind Charles. So you can take that by the end of the season. You could possibly get Carlos as well.
I'll get that.
By the end of the year.
I can get who, Carlos?
You could. If the next few races go as well as the last couple of races.
Interesting.
So, with that in mind,
I could win.
with that, could you win? Do you think you can?
No. With the race, I said the championship, but
no, that's pretty much done.
No, I doubt it. I think the Red Bull and Max are doing too good of a job at the minute. We're getting there. We're getting closer and closer, but unless they have like another Singapore-esque weekend, which I doubt. It's unlikely, but we're doing a very good job. To have a P2 and a P3 shows we're doing a very good job. So it proves it for everyone, for the whole team as well, which is a nice thing. But we still want more, so we're still trying to fight for that.
But to have seen the rate of development in season, how much confidence does that give you for the development that you'll see through the winter and into next year to potentially take that fight to Red Bull?
Huge. Just if we were to imagine starting the year off like this, if we going to have a Bahrain P2 and a P3, then the confidence level at the beginning of the year, the stress for everyone is significantly less than how we started this year. We started in a very difficult pre-season test, pretty horrendous first race of the season, DNF or just 6 pit stops. I still remember everyone. So we not started the last 3 years off with confidence, with direction and all those things, and now we're definitely on the right path, and we almost have all of that. So I do look forward to next year already, with what we can achieve and what we can do over the winter. But for now, the target is to get P4 in the constructors, to get ahead of Aston. But it's reassuring to know how much progress we made, an unmatched amount of progress comparing to any other team this season. It's a huge thing for everyone, including myself.
I'd imagine McLaren may well be in a fair few F1 fantasy teams out there. We'll have to wait and see how they go. We will have Norris and Piastri feature interviews coming this weekend across our shows as well. Moving on to Alpine, they were locked in the battle with McLaren last season, not to be for this season. They're sort of stranded out there in P6, and Will still without any sort of leadership named at the top. And of course, a difficult weekend last time out between the two drivers with that last-minute driver switch on the final lap, driver etiquette and all that. Do you think that's been resolved from what you've seen today, heard today?
Well, Esteban had said right from the outset, look, this is just a rule we have in the team. I let Pierre through to have a go at Fernando. He didn't manage to put the move on Fernando, so we swapped the positions back. We see it at teams length and breadth of the field. Pierre was unhappy with it. Neither one of them was talking about it today. They were asked about it, and they just said, we've resolved it internally, and we're all good. But you're right. The management structure of the team baffles me when you have Davide Brivio, who had so much success in MotoGP with Yamaha and Suzuki, standing at the back of the garage twiddling his thumbs every weekend. I don't understand why they're not utilising him for something more than they are. I don't get it. I still don't understand it, really. And it does appear that they're just a little bit at sea right now, but, picking up points wherever they can. But no, they're nowhere... Hello, the lights come back on. They're nowhere near the level that they expected to be or would want to be, because they should be up there fighting with McLaren.
We'll see how they fare this weekend. And Lawrence, moving on to Williams, a double DNF in Japan on a track which may well have suited them. Singapore certainly looking good for Alex Albon before it wasn't. It's been a tricky couple of weekends, but not least on Logan Sergeant. The pressure heaped on his shoulders at the moment, the one remaining seat in this Formula One paddock. How do you think he's coping and faring?
I think he's coping with it pretty well, to be honest, because he's had so many incidents across this season. The pressure has built and built and built, and I know James Fowles has come out again and put his arm around him and said, look, we're supporting you, we're giving you every chance. But I think Logan's actually dealing with it really well. What's just disappointing is, and he'll openly admit this, he can't put a weekend together. He can't get a whole weekend together. There are patches during a weekend where he's very quick. There's patches where he can even match Alex, but he just can't put it together. And the problem is then, when you make those big mistakes, it just looks really bad for you, especially when Alex is performing so strongly. Really difficult weekend for them last time out in Japan, but I think that shows how far they've come that we're saying that, right?
Totally.
They've had a double DNF, but that used to be a more common occurrence. Now, they're regularly fighting for the lower end of the points. And I'm really impressed with what they've done. They've turned all their attention to next year already, but I still think there's a couple of races this year where they can perform strongly, and I actually think this one is going to be one of them.
You're bang on, actually. I'm now disappointed to see Williams not scoring points, and that isn't something I thought we'd be saying at the start of the season at all. We can now hear, though, from the man under a fair bit of pressure, Logan Sergeant.
So Logan, big weekend for you because it's a track you don't know that well. How are you feeling about it? How much time have you spent in the simulator?
Loads of laps in the sim. Really cool track from what I've experienced so far. I think it's going to be a really tricky weekend, not just for us, but for everyone. The track evolution is going to be huge. We're the only people driving this weekend, and the track's for sure going to be dirty to start with in FP1. So that's already going to be a big thing. Weather conditions from P1 to quali are going to be, massively different in terms of temperature. That changes loads. So it's going to be trying to, preempt quite a lot heading into quali, and just understanding what could come our way and how best to go about it.
Now, it's great to see James was giving you so much support between races, just saying he's giving you every chance to try and prove that you can be in the Formula One for next season. How much does that help your confidence, and how are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I feel okay. It was nice to have a weekend off. And yeah, honestly, pace-wise, it's been solid the last 4 rounds. Just haven't kept it clean, and that's really been the defining moment of all the weekends, rather than the pace that's been improving constantly. So it's just about maybe dialing it back a little bit, just making sure I have some clean weekends, and honestly, with the pace that we've had, I think I can afford to dial it back a little bit and just have some clean weekends.
Great, so best of luck.
His teammate Alex Albon very much agreeing that Logan Sergeant does have the pace and saying he doesn't quite get the credit he deserves as well earlier in the press conference. Will, what are your thoughts on Logan Sergeant and that Williams seat?
I think Logan's in the fortuitous position that there's no one really who can take that seat from him at the moment. Being an American, I think that plays very well for him. How many rookies are there out there that could replace him, or even experienced drivers that could take his place? Again, not many. So he's kind of safe, but really not because he's doing a great job, just because there's nobody that you can really see taking that seat from him. It's weird. I think he peaked in Saudi Arabia. That for me was like his best weekend, and as Lawrence said, he just can't put the weekends together. I know it's tough for rookies to get a feel for the tyres. Even Oscar Piastri, who's having great races at the moment, you see how much he struggles for race pace alongside Lando, and that's all feel of the tyre. So I know that's going to be difficult for Logan. Plus, he's teamed up with Alex Albon, who's one of the most underrated drivers in this paddock. He is phenomenally quick. So he's got all that acting against him. The one thing he had going for him was he wasn't crashing. Now he is crashing, and now he's costing the team money. So at what point does Logan, and what Logan brings to the team, both in terms of finance and an American awareness, whatever that is that worth more than the damage he does to the cars? And if he's not scoring points, ultimately costing Williams potentially places in the World Championship. And that's the consideration that Williams have to really weigh up. Yes, James Vale's very much on his side, but it's similar noises to what we heard about Alex Albon at Red Bull. We love the guy, we want him to stay. And then at the end it was like, but we can't. So I don't know.
Well, Logan, James Vowles and Williams have got 6 races to try and turn things around. We'll move to Haas now, Lawrence, and they're trying incredibly hard to get out of this hole they're currently in. Just explain what's going on with that team.
They're essentially just putting a really brave face on the fact that they've got a car that is probably the worst in the field at the minute, particularly on a race day. It comes alive a little bit more on qualifying over one lap because they can actually get the tyres in their window working. But obviously, as soon as you then put laps on those tyres, they can't understand why, and they've realised the concept that they've picked is not the right one, which is why they're pinning so much hope on this big upgrade that they're going to bring next time out in Austin. And effectively, it's a waiting game for Kevin and for Nico. They've got to get through this weekend, do the best they can, and then pin all their hopes on that Austin upgrade.
F2 driver Ollie Behrman, just 18 years old, the young Brit, will be making his Formula One weekend debut, running in FP1 for the Haas team. He will become the youngest Brit ever to do so, breaking Lando Norris's record. So we'll look forward to seeing him a bit later on in the season for the Haas outfit. Will, coming on to Alfa Romeo, Bottas looking forward to some upgrades, to seeing how they really bed in and work here.
Yeah, it's been a disappointing run, I think, for the whole team this year. They're on 10 points for the entire season, and it just hasn't worked out for them the entire way through. And Valtteri's really been out of sorts this year, with the exception of, 1 or 2 good results at the start of the season. He's been fairly anonymous, and we've had weekends where we can't remember his name being mentioned once during commentary for a Grand Prix. He has to step it up. Both him and Joe have got the comfort now of knowing that they have the seats for next season. They have to prove they're worthy of those seats, but the team has to start showing that the upgrades they're bringing are going to deliver for them on track.
We move on finally to AlphaTauri, and it's looking likely this is going to be Liam Lawson's last race, and what a stint he has had as well. It's been brilliant to watch from home and see him not just get into the points, but then knock on the door in 11th place as well, and have brilliant drives too. Ricardo like to come back in Austin, we think, Lawrence.
Yep, that's the aim. That's what I think. I think Austin was always the one that Daniel would have probably thought, if I can get back for there. He likes that track. He was very comfortable in America, and he needed to give himself 100% of the time he needed to get back to full fitness. He's doing everything right. He's hoping to be there, but Liam has done a fantastic job standing in. Like we talk about how drivers don't get much testing, they don't get much time to get used to their car, and yet Liam has jumped into this car. He's scored points already. He's finished 11th twice, and he's performing so strongly relative to Yuki. And there are a multitude of factors why, okay, Yuki's had a few off weekends because of the car and what have you, but the job that Liam has done is fantastic. And that's why Red Bull are not only keen to hold him onto him as a reserve driver, but he's very much part of their future, and however that will be. And they always operate it in this way, have a lot of drivers in their pool, and then they can draft them in whenever they see fit.
Will, finally, very quickly to you, AlphaTauri, how are we expecting to go here? Quick?
The upgrade,
the
upgrade package is working. Spoke to Yuki today. He's seriously optimistic for them for the remainder of the season. Going to be a difficult one here. Wind changes direction all the time. That's going to affect all the teams this weekend. But Yuki said if it's going one way, they'll be great. It turns 180, it's going to be horrible.
Oh, we'll see what happens then. And we are expecting plenty of weather and very hot weather at that. But thank you very much, boys. Before we go, it's the all-important part. I've not thought about it at all. Very out of practice, clearly. Lawrence, I'll come to you first. Prediction for the Qatar Grand Prix.
So I think Max is going to win the championship in the sprint. I think he's going to win the sprint. He's going to win the Grand Prix, and he's going to just do what he's done all season, which is absolutely command this weekend. And we should be very, very celebratory about the fact that he has delivered such an incredible job this year.
Max wins the sprint and the World Championship, goes out on Saturday night, parties, doesn't turn up on Sunday. Lando wins
Wow.
from Oscar. There you go. That's
Okay, that's an alternate reality that Will Buxton is living in. Just a little snapshot into his mind there. I am also going to say Max Verstappen to win the title on Saturday through the sprint race, and I'm going to predict another double McLaren podium as well. I think we are going to see somewhat of a repeat of Japan, but let's wait and see. What are predictions, eh? We don't really know anything. They're just there to make us look really, really silly. Do get in touch, hashtag F1 Live, and make sure you get your F1 fantasy teams locked in before qualifying as well. Don't forget, it's a sprint weekend, of course, and that means qualifying is tomorrow. It is going to be action-packed from start to finish, and we can now take a look at the schedule. Here then is how your Qatar Grand Prix weekend is shaping up. 4:15, we build up to our only hour of practice. That comes at 4:30. And then 7:30 p.m. we have our pre-qualifying show. 8 p.m. for qualifying. That sets the grid for Sunday's race. And then the post-qualifying show immediately afterwards. 15:45 will build up to the sprint shootout on Sprint Saturday. And then a 4 p.m. for our shootout to decide the grid for our sprint race. 10 to 8 is our pre-sprint show, with the race coming at 8:30. And then we move on to Sunday race day here in Qatar. And of course, it's a night race here. Due to the temperatures, it's shifted everything super late here. 7 p.m. we'll be on air for our pre-race show, and 8 p.m. for the Qatar Grand Prix. Well, thank you very much for watching our weekend warm-up. Thank you to Will and Lawrence, who've been very busy today, speaking to lots of drivers. Max Verstappen poised to claim his third title. We'll see how this sprint weekend shapes up at the Qatar Grand Prix.